Uhuru comrades, and welcome to today's Omali Tommy Sunday study featuring Chairman Omali Yeshitela. My name is Akile Anai, Director of Agitation and Propaganda for the African People's Socialist Party, as well as your MC for this morning. We this study is highly important, and we encourage you right now to invite your friends and family to it. Joining us today is not only Chairman Omali Yeshitela, but Secretary General Louise Kinshasa of the African Socialist International, Deputy Chair Onisene Yeshitela, Impedum President Columbai Antoinette, ANWO, the African National Women's Organization President Yejide Odumila, the All African People's Development and Empowerment Project Director, Dr. Aisha Fields, the National Director of Organization Chimaranga Silambao, and the regional representatives, including the Northern Regional Representative Matum Nyobe, Midwest Regional Representative Malika Alexander, and Bakri Olatunji, the representative for the Western region. And we also have the chairwoman of the African People's Solidarity Committee, Chairwoman Penny Hess. So I want to really thank you and appreciate the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party and the Uhuru movement. And we continue our series of displaying the practical work of our party. We're continuing that series. So today we're discussing the party's mass organizations, the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement, the African National Women's Organization, the All African People's Development and Empowerment Project, and the African People's Solidarity Committee and the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. This discussion will be led by our chairman, Omali Yeshitela, and will feature presentations from Columbai Antoinette, Yejide Odumila, Dr. Aisha Fields, and Penny Hess. This discussion is especially important today as we see the righteous uprisings of Africans all around the world. It's important for us now to get organized on a revolutionary trajectory. The African People's Socialist Party has over 50 years of organizing experience, reflected in the various mass organizations under our leadership. We are prepared during this period of struggle to bring the masses beyond protest. Our mass organizations and the work we do in them gives our struggle a to-what end. As a framework for this discussion, we will reference Vanguard Chapter 2, Our Party Solved the Problems of the Revolution, starting on page 57 to 60. We will start with an overview with our chairman, followed by Impedum President Columbai, ANWO President Yejide Odumila, APDEP Director Dr. Aisha Fields, and APSU Chairwoman Penny Hess, in that order. Following the presentations, we'll open up for our live audience to ask questions of any of our panelists that you see present today. It's my honor now to introduce our leadership, the leader of the African nation and the worldwide African revolution, Chairman Omali Yeshitela. Uhuru, Chairman.
Uhuru, thank you so very much, Comrade Akile, for that introduction. I'd like to also express my appreciation for being able to participate in this study today with all of the comrades from our Central Committee, including, as you just mentioned, our Director of International Affairs, who is also the Secretary General of the African Socialist International, who's located in London. He is located in London, born in Congo, and in London as a consequence of being pushed out of Congo many years ago, several years ago, subsequent to the murder of Patrice Lumumba and the consequential situation that we see ourselves being confronted with in Congo today. I wanted to mention that because I think it's important as we see the Central Committee of our party that's located primarily, those forces located primarily in the United States, that we help the people who are not members of our party, may be unfamiliar with our party, to understand that ours is an international organization. That we are everywhere African people are, and that we have a responsibility to be there because ours is an international issue. Our contradiction, our oppression, our exploitation has its origin in the assault on Africa. That's responsible for everybody in this discussion who's not in Africa, with the exception of Comrade Penny Hess, for being where we are. So I just think that's really important to make that acknowledgement. Secondly, I want to unite with you about the significance of this study as being revealed to us through the lenses of those who have to observe and participate in the rolling expressions of resistance, uprisings, and what have you happening inside the United States in particular. Comrade Luisa will have to leave this meeting early because the implications of what's happening here, this is really important for us to understand, to African people, is pushing Africans around the world to unite with our brothers and sisters. And so there's going to be a mobilization, a demonstration by African people at the US Embassy on today in London. And Comrade Luisa will be going with our party members and Uhuru forces to participate in that mobilization to give it an African internationalist character, or to certainly to intervene as much as possible to take the science of African internationalist revolution into that mobilization. So the thing that's really important about this again is that the resistance is heightening. People moving in incredibly significant ways today, challenging US imperialism. It's worth noting that on last night, a frightened simpleton who occupies the office of the White House, the official center of US political power, domination of the world, that's terrorizing people in places like Venezuela and Iran and throughout the Middle East, that's terrorizing, threatening nuclear war, even if subtly so, against Russia and against China. This cowering leader of this organization found himself surrounded by thousands of people who at the White House in demonstrations, and it had to be a frightening specter for him because we have just seen a day or so earlier masses of African people and others who attacked the police station, the 3rd precinct in Minneapolis, and burned it down as the cops, the domestic military forces fled that military outpost in our communities and left it deserted for occupation by the people. And I guess this man in the White House today had to be aware of that and pray that it was not something that made a prediction of his need for hasty flight. So I think that what we're looking at is something, in some instances, we've seen this period that we're approaching today. We see it in some instances as a reflection of a revolutionary movement that we saw in the 1960s before it was defeated, where the peoples of the world experienced incredible expectations of being free, being in possession of our own resources once again, including our dignity as people. And what happened, of course, is that the US and other imperialist forces were able ultimately to crush that revolutionary movement, kill, assassinate leaders around the world, inside this country, making the conditions, reinforcing the conditions in places like Congo that's responsible for Comrade Secretary General Louise Kinshasa to be sitting with us today in London, as opposed to in Congo, where I'm sure he'd much rather be and where I'd much rather be, frankly. So, but the thing is that all of these struggles have to result in actual the liberation of our people. It's not something, although it's currently fed by anger and disgust by the people at what they have been forced to see with the brutal, grotesque colonial murder of Brother George Floyd. Much of what we see is a response, directly a visceral response to that. Ultimately, we have to go beyond that. As important, and it is important, as it's significant, and it is significant. It's just incredible because of a number of reasons. But what's really necessary for us to understand is that we have to go beyond that. We have to be involved in the discussion and the actions that will result and our having power over our own lives. It's the thing, one of the most significant things that that these rebellions represent, that we are seeing today. It's not simply a defeat of imperialism. It's not simply that we've got this white guy in the White House with cowering perhaps under his desk and hoping that nobody is able to come in and sweep him out of there and out of history. It's more than that. It's a really important thing that has occurred is that these mobilizations, these torchings of Target and destruction of police stations and masses of people and unbridled motion, it represents a major defeat of the ideological lock, political lock on the brains and actions of African people who are so oppressed, so beaten down, a defeat of the African petty bourgeoisie. That's an important instrument of our oppression. It represents the potential deafening ultimate defeat of the opportunists who always step in every time the masses rise up, and they have succeeded up to now, along with the military arm, along with the people, forces who are killing people like George Floyd. They have succeeded in quieting the masses down, keeping the masses out of direct political motion that would lead to overthrowing our oppression. They have blocked even and made it appear insane that anybody would dare think about challenging white power, would dare think that Africa could be united and liberated and African people could be free, that the people of Venezuela should become possessors of their own resources, that the people in Iran could actually, without having to fear the starvation and terror, be able to possess their resources. All of this is what we have been trapped by in so many ways. And the African Revolution, which has been so crucial to the development of the revolutionary process throughout the world. And when I say the African Revolution, I mean that in general terms, and I mean specifically as it has made itself manifest in the United States. It's been critical. It was critical to the actual defeat of US imperialism in Vietnam, because it made it necessary not only for the United States to fight against the heroic and struggling, brilliant revolutionary movement in Vietnam, but they had to deploy forces in Detroit in the United States, and they had to deploy forces throughout the United States. They had to bring them home. They had to be engaged in fighting on every front. And the world is looking today as the US is having to fight on every front. What are the people in Venezuela thinking now? This US that's been starving them, that's been threatening them with all kinds of oppression and destruction. What are the people of Iran, the people in Palestine, to whom the United States had handed over their land to these white people from occupied, these so-called Israelis. And all of these people are watching this and celebrating the struggle of African people. But what is important, and this we've been going through in these studies, is that nobody can unite with African people who are fighting to make white people like them. And this whole notion that we're fighting against racism to get white people to like us is also something that right now we have by the throat and have the ability to crush it, because the struggle is not to make white people like us. How can any government, any revolutionary movement say, yeah, we unite with Black people struggling in America to make white people like them? But you say we're fighting against colonialism. And colonialism is something that has been experienced by most of the oppressed people in the world one way or another, and is currently being experienced, especially by Africans and others around the world. And so people can unite with that. In the world, the whole configuration of the political struggles in the world, what made the United Nations appear relevant in the 1960s is this uprising of people taking power, and that before the United States succeeded in coming in, crushing those and redefining those movements, just like they have in other places, just like they tried to do in Minneapolis. And that's why we are important in the African People's Socialist Party. Because for the first time in history, this critical development of the African working class has its own revolutionary party that speaks to its interests. And what we are dealing with today with this discussion is revealing to ourselves and to other people who may be watching and otherwise participating in the study, the expression of the people's organization under the leadership of the party. The party leads. We're not doing civil rights stuff anymore. The revolution was defeated, but that doesn't mean that we go back and do the civil rights and start all over again. No, we don't start all over again. We start from the perspective that revolution has to occur. And for that to occur, there must be revolutionary organization that can lead on every front around the question of African women, around the question of African development, around the question of African unification, around every fundamental question, around the question of white people. How do we define that beyond the mysterious characterizations that we've used up in the past? So that's what we'll be dealing with today. And so it would give people other than those who are in our party and those who are in our movement an understanding of the significance of the African working class finally having its own revolutionary organization, finally being guided by its own revolutionary theory. It's not theory that's borrowed from any other force, but it's a theory that sums up the world based on location of Africa and African people in the development of this whole capitalist system that came as a consequence of our enslavement and dispersal around the world. It's magnificent. So I'm going to go ahead and open it up. First, I just want to read from pages 57 to 60. It's short, so that I think I can do that without, even with the rather long introduction that I've just begun with. So on page 57, we talk a lot throughout this thing about how we've solved so many problems of the revolution. And at the top of the page, party made reparations a mass demand. Another problem solved by our party was to give reality to the demand for reparations that had been talked about within the national liberation movement for generations. It was we who took the reparations demand out of the straitjacket of purely legal and legislative approaches. We are the organization that gave the reparations demand a mass and concrete character. We deepened the theoretical and political basis for the demand and began the practical process of acquiring reparations that made it a reality and not just wishful thinking. When our party began this work, the so-called reparations movement was only considering compensation for African colonial slavery. It was we who recognized that the rate of exploitation of Africa and African people has grown greater since the formal end of our legal enslavement. The existing, and we say this about slavery, but you look at the African continent, our homeland, the theft of which has had such a severe impact, not only on our material well-being, but on the soul and spirit of our people. It has created a life of demoralization that we no longer recognize as such because it has been so ingrained in our reality. It's in a permanent state of what is defined as depression that we live in and don't recognize it's depression because it's there all the time. And anyway, it's been powerful. So we say that, and look at how much expropriation of value since the end of what they call colonialism, what they have called colonialism, since independence, how much more, how much greater has the theft of our resources become? And the same thing is true with the end of former colonial slavery in the United States. The theft of our resources, the rate of exploitation has grown greater and greater. And they have been able to have certain successes up to now, especially since they have taken from us a memory of the basis of our oppression where we are and convinced us that we are no longer who we were, but now we are something new and different and part of the actual oppressor that's responsible for our state of condition, our state of existence. So we say that the existing reparations movement of today bears the imprint of the work of the advanced detachment of the African working class and forcibly dispersed African nation. It bears the imprint of the African People's Socialist Party. It was we who made the reparations demand a mass demand of our people. In 1982, we formed the African National Reparations Organization, ANWO. ANWO held reparations tribunals throughout the United States for 12 years. In fact, most of the noted reparations activists of today gained their reparations involvement through a direct or indirect relationship to the work of our party. Only the advanced detachment would be able to use the political device of international law and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, given the right of oppressed peoples to bring their cases before the bourgeois world court. Only African internationalism could inform us of the necessary conclusion that reparations are owed because of parasitic capitalism and our stolen labor, land, and resources. Our understanding that the reparations demand is a function of the revolution allowed the party to open a serious front among the colonizer population. Through the reparations demand, we are able to win thousands of so-called whites to conscious participation in the assault on white nationalist colonialism. For some, their introduction to active political life was and is in the reparations work created and led by our party. And just yesterday, Comrade Akile, who is over this meeting in our department of, part of our central committee, led a demonstration of 300 or 400 people onto the police station and demanding not only reparations, but an end to colonialism. And these were white people, many of them, rather I should say, were white people who were demanding an end to colonialism, not racism. And Comrade Akile in her presentation was quite clear that this is the man. We're not talking about racism or whether you like us or not. We're saying that the struggle has to be against colonialism, and got resounding cheers from the colonizer citizens who were participating in that mobilization. Our party solved the problem of white people. It is our party that took the mystery out of the question of white people. We brought the definition of white people down to earth, destroying the myths of biological and religious determinism. We advanced the often unpopular declaration that white people are people whose behavior can be explained by a scientific, historical, materialist analysis. We resolved the outstanding question of white people in a practical way with the formation of the African People's Solidarity Committee, APSC, in 1976, the organization of whites working under our leadership with the strategic assignment of collecting reparations from North Americans to forward our struggle for African national liberation. The party built revolutionary mass organizations. The African People's Socialist Party created mass organizations that made it unnecessary for us to abandon our revolutionary trajectory in order to win non-revolutionary masses to the revolutionary politic, programs, and leadership of the party. Some groups did that. That's what they claimed. They did it because the masses were now in a place where they were not ready for the revolution. Therefore, we had to become civil rights leaders or build civil rights movement. Politically, we initiated various campaigns and relationships to defeat the US counterinsurgency and protect and advance the interests of the African working class that has suffered the brunt of the defeat of our revolutionary movement. The African People's Socialist Party led major campaigns to recognize and free many of our political prisoners who fell during the counterinsurgency when imperialism was most determined to destroy any semblance of resistance. Pitts and Lee, Al Courtney, Connie Tucker, Desi Woods, Angela Davis, Huey P. Newton, Fleeta Drumgo, George Jackson, Sundiata Kohli, Assata Shakur, the San Quentin Six, Republic of New Africa 11, Freddie Lee Roberts, Mafundi Lake, and myself are some of the people we defended and sometimes freed when their arrest and imprisonment were being used to crush the revolution and the spirit of the people. At a time when there was no other organized African response, we formed the African National Prison Organization, ANPO, in 1979, which we created as millions of Africans were being caught up in the net of colonial mass incarceration. In 1991, the International People's Democratic Uhuru movement, NPDUM, was formed in Chicago to fight the counterinsurgency and defend the democratic rights of the African community. So the counterinsurgency, that's what was crush the revolution. So we don't say, okay, the revolution's been crushed, therefore let's have a civil rights movement. We say, no, we defeat the counterinsurgency that has crushed and defeated the revolution. That has to happen under revolutionary leadership, not civil rights leadership. You haven't seen a civil rights leader yet that's called for the release of political prisoners. It was not the civil rights movement that made reparations a household word, that mobilized masses. It was the revolutionary organization, the Advanced Detachment of African People's Socialist Party, that did that. We formed the African National Women's Organization, ANWO, in response to the oppression of African women, and was a vehicle of the party to bring masses of African women into political life, the party and the revolution, not to engage in some feminist nonsense, but to bring women into political life to fight against the total domination of African people. An excerpt from the political report to the Fifth Congress stated quite simply, ANWO could become, and I'm quoting, the powerful home to African women who are constantly under some form of assault by a myriad of contradictions that are peculiar to African women. ANWO would provide a mass organization for women who need to confront their oppression and exploitation. It would allow the party to develop a reserve for the revolution through helping women to recognize the universal contradictions confronting our people and class that are located in the specific contradictions they are confronting as women, unquote. So this is what I want to do as an introduction to the study that we are having today, or as a part of the study that sets up the discussion. So the study that we're doing today, as we have been for at least a week or so, and as we will next week, is to bring the theory, bring the practice, bring what we've been studying in the political reports down to life by having living human beings. We have an organization, not just an individual talking head. We have an organization. You have an opportunity to see the people who represent your party, our party, in the flesh, more or less. And you can have an ability to understand the significance of what was written on that paper by hearing from the actual people who are involved in solving the problems of the revolution through the vehicle of the advanced detachment of our class and our nation, national struggle for liberation. Uhuru. Comrade Kile, why don't you take it?
Uhuru, thank you, Chairman, and thank you for laying that foundation for us. So now we're going to go ahead and introduce or bring on our the leaders of the mass organizations. We're going to start with President Kalambai of the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement, and that will be followed by President Yeshitela of the African National Women's Organization, and then Director Aisha Fields of the All African People's Development and Empowerment Project. And we will close out with Chairwoman Penny Hess of the African People's Solidarity Committee before we go into questions from our online viewers. So President Kalambai, you got 10 minutes to tell us about the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement. Uhuru.
Akila, is she unmuted?
Uhuru,
we can't hear you.
Okay, we can hear her now. Uh-oh, we can hear her now, I think. Oh, wait. Kalambai, we can't hear you. I heard you for like a brief second and then it was gone.
Can we go to the next presenter and then come back to Comrade Kalambai?
Okay. Yeah, okay. So President Yejide, can you go while we try to figure out this sound issue with President Kalambai?
Yes. Uhuru, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, just give me 1 second. Uhuru, comrade, so thank you so much for that opening, Chairman. And as always, it really helps and deepens the understanding that that African people have to make an African revolution in order to be free. And so the African National Women's Organization is an organization that was created by the African People's Socialist Party, as the chairman said, to bring masses of African women into revolutionary political life. I want to go through some points just so I make sure that I'm clear on who we are, what we believe. So first of all, we are not feminists. We are African internationalists, and we follow the aims and objectives consistent with the theory of African internationalism. That means that we are not fighting against patriarchy or racism, but we are fighting against colonialism. And our current situation as African women is a result of the attack on Africa and the theft of our resources, the theft of our labor, and which came as a result of slavery and colonialism. We are a membership organization that is comprised of African women who recognize our responsibility to organize with each other across borders and to address and overturn the special oppression of African women. This is the revolutionary strategy of the party, and we are bringing African women into revolutionary political life. We also desire to see a liberated and united socialist Africa where workers have power and where women are leaders and shapers of society. And this must be done through the process of making the African revolution. We believe that this work to bring African women into a collective process of solving not just our immediate problems, but to solve the problems of the African women and all people, all African people throughout the world. We understand that capitalism began at African people's expense and is contingent on the continued exploitation of Africa and African people. And we believe in an organized resistance against capitalism is necessary to destroy the exploitation that causes the special oppression of African women. So we want to embrace our place as leaders in the struggle to end colonial oppression of African people worldwide. And part of that process is looking at all the things that are impacting us that makes our oppression special and to fight against it. And that means that we have to organize. We have to build an organized contingent to make that happen. And ANWO is not just something, I am the international president of the African National Women's Organization. So that means that my responsibility is to organize African women all over the world. So to look at what is impacting us in the United States. Colonialism is the overarching thing. That's the contradiction. That's the core contradiction of what we're dealing with. But there are specificities that are happening to us in the United States. There are things that are happening to us in Africa, in different places in Africa, in Europe, in the Caribbean, that has to be contextualized under the auspices of colonialism. So if you're talking about, for example, African women in South Africa who feel compelled, who cannot take care of their children, and therefore some of them leave their children in the dumpsters, we have to look at that and contextualize that as colonialism, because we have all the resources that African people should have on the African continent. So there should be no reason why African women don't feel that they can take care of that we can't take care of ourselves. And so when we look at that specific question, it's not a question of like patriarchy or trying to fix, trying to find housing and jobs and stuff for African women. That will help, but that's going to continue to happen. African women are going to feel compelled to do these drastic things because of the fact that we do not have power. We are not building a free and liberated, united Africa that can protect and defend the rights of African people and protect and defend the rights of African women. And so there's these desperate situations that are happening all over the world that we are confronted with. In the United States, there's a myriad, and all over the world, African women are vulnerable to sex work and all these other types of things. But more importantly, that the colonial question is a question that has to be brought into the question of African women. Like if we're not looking at colonial domination, if we're just looking at the symptoms of it, then we're always going to be going around in this circle. And so African National Women's Organization helps us to see that. It organizes African women and projects us to fight. And it's not done under the chairman mentioned feminism. I also mentioned feminism at the top, but it really is not about that question of looking at, men or anything, because it wasn't men. it was white men and white women who participated in the enslavement and colonization of African people, who would benefit from the enslavement and colonization of African people, and caused the deep and profound, exploitation of us in that manner as well. And so when we look at the question of African women, we look at all of that. So everything that that's happening is a result of that. We are an anti-imperialist. We are the only anti-imperialist, anti-colonial, revolutionary African women's organization who is leading on the everyday issues that impact African women. And to bring African women into political life, socially, politically, to forward the interests of African people internationally through our programs aimed at particularly the advancement of African women, to liberate African women and men from the customs and practices that serve to keep us subjugated. And so when we look at the whole entire scope of the African nation, we know that African women comprise more than half of the entire African population. So it doesn't make sense that African women are left behind, that we have to have an organized response to that, and the African National Women's Organization is that. So what does it mean to see African women playing our role in making choices and decisions around how Africa and African people are going to move forward? How are we solving these problems that are a result of colonialism? Because we can't allow for these things to be brought forward into the revolutionary, united, free Africa, that we have to begin solving and overturning these problems now as a result of colonialism. But in the process of doing that, we have to be fighting against the system itself. It's not enough to be in our little enclave saying we want to do childcare collectives and we want to stop African children from being thrown by the dumpster or from being kidnapped by the state. It's not enough just to say this is the specific issue. We recognize that colonialism, fighting against colonialism, fighting against capitalism is the key factor that's going to end all of that. And when we organize African women around these specific issues, we make sure they understand that, yes, we are going to do this. We're going to do this action. We're going to do this work. But it's also a responsibility for us to go beyond that. The chairman says, to what end are we in the streets right now protesting? To what end are we saying that we want to stop the police from killing us and stop the police from, being an occupying force in our community? To what end are we saying that we want the state to have to stop the mass incarceration of African people? To what end? And so this African internationalism helps us understand that the end of all of that requires us to think further and beyond just what's happening right now. And so, we are here to govern. African People's Socialist Party is about taking and assuming the leadership of the African working class and preparing us as African people to govern and define and lead the trajectory of our lives. So we are in this moment and in this program right now are going to see like the mass organizations that are going to take it to the next step. And so the organizing, the practicing, and training African women to look at the whole question of colonialism and capitalism as the core contradiction against the freedom of African people and the cause of the special oppression of African women is a defining piece of the work of the African National Women's Organization. So we've been in existence for the last 5 years, and we are going to have our convention that's going to happen on July 11th and 12th. And this is going to be an entire program that's focused on developing exactly what I said, deepening some of the issues that are happening to us as African women, but also organizing African women to join the African Revolution through the African National Women's Organization, through the African People's Socialist Party, because that's the only way. That is the only way. If we focus on patriarchy, if we focus on men and what men doing, we don't have any explanation about what's happening in the world. So how do we explain that majority of African women who are farmers and or who are involved in agriculture work on the continent of Africa aren't getting paid enough money? Is that a result of patriarchy? No, that's a result of colonial domination and capitalist exploitation that robs Africa of its labor, robs Africa of its resources, and therefore, by that very nature, decides whether or not African women and African men can get paid a decent salary. we're saying that the African Revolution, nobody is going to be without work. Everybody's going to be a part of this process, and African women are going to be a part of that, because there's no other way to have an African Revolution without the full participation of African women. And we're seeing that right now within this African People's Socialist Party, where African women assume the leadership or have the leadership of much of the party's organizations and continue to push the work forward. So it's the defining point of the nature, defining, what's the word I'm looking for? It's defining core element of the African People's Socialist Party is to showcase that African women are not just trapped in this bubble of dealing with African women's issues, but that we are involved in the whole process of building the African Revolution. And the development of the African National Women's Organization send us out into this world where feminism dominates, and saying, really distracts African women from the core contradiction and has us fighting against, even within our own African nation. And so we say that that's not the way to go. It really is about helping African women understand, again, the basis of our colonialism, the basis of our oppression, and to fight our way out of that. And so we do organizing, we do campaigns, we do look at all these specific oppressions, and it's about being bold and going out and doing the work that's going to ensure that we are building skilled and chiseled cadre who can take on the work of the African National Women's Organization, but also lead in the African Revolution. So, and we believe that when we bring women into a collective process of solving these problems, that we are, really defining what African internationalism is. The chairman has always said that we are not fighting against we're not fighting to have an African American revolution. We're not having an African Ghanaian revolution or an African Caribbean revolution, wherever you may. We have to be organizing with each other across borders for this vision of a free, united, socialist Africa that's under the leadership of the African working class, and African women comprise the African working class. And therefore, Africa is ours. Africa is our birthright. Africa is something that we desire to have as ours, because we want to claim it. And so I just really appreciate the opportunity to talk to everyone out here who is looking at this study and really trying to contextualize like what it is that this party and this movement can be to them. And I really want to encourage African women who are looking at this process to also join the African National Women's Organization and join the African People's Socialist Party. Uhuru.
Uhuru. Comrade Akili, I think Comrade President Kalambai from the NPDM, International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement, I think we resolved the sound question there.
We should have, but now it seems like I can't hear her again. I'm not sure why. When she came on, I heard her, but now I don't know.
Can she sign off and come back on?
Yeah, I think that's what she had done the first time.
Okay.
And that.
Can we continue working with that and move forward to Comrade, is it Dr. Aisha Fields we'll be listening to now from the All African People's Development and Empowerment Project?
Uhuru, yes.
Uhuru Abdab.
Yes.
Gotta fix that, Kalambai. Yeah, can't hear. Yeah. Uhuru, Comrade Aisha.
Uhuru Chairman, Director Akile, other members of the National Central Committee of the African People's Socialist Party. And I want to say Uhuru to everybody who's participating in this study. And just say that I'm really honored to have an opportunity to participate. Chairman has been doing these studies for years now, and I'm happy to have an opportunity to share the platform, on this Omali Sunday study. So thank you very much for the invitation. And I want to really salute that presentation, the overview, the chairman, and the presentation from Comrade Yeshitela, which I thought was really powerful, and really appreciate and salute the work of the African National Women's Organization. And the organization that I'm responsible for leading as a member of the National Central Committee of the African People's Socialist Party is called the All African Peoples Development and Empowerment Project, or APDEP for short. APDEP is an organization that was established by the African People's Socialist Party in 2007. And the party determined to establish APDEP because while we had a history, a real great history, in fact, of establishing, dual power community programs around health and other areas of work, including a really dynamic, mobile freedom clinic that we organized as a party in Oakland, California in the 80s, organized, medical professionals and others to donate their skills, to volunteer their skills to our party and movement, and to give those skills to the working class African community in Oakland, and providing free medical care to our people where we didn't have access to it. And we had other kind of great programs, some of them housed in the African People's Education and Defense Fund, which is another organization of our movement that works to deal with health disparities and the disparities around economic development and around human rights for African people, doing health fairs and other kind of really great work to try to address the conditions of African people. That party determined that we wanted to have an organization that would have the specific mission of organizing African people with certain kind of specialized skills to be able to become a part of the process of moving African people towards freedom, towards African liberation, and for there to be a space for us to be able to turn those skills over, for us to not simply be tied to a process where, many of us who to become doctors or nurses or engineers or teachers or other kind of skilled people are seeking to deal with our own, our collective problem as a people on an individual basis, but have the ability to turn those skills over to be able to ensure that all African people have the ability to have a free and liberated Africa that can serve as the basis for all of us to meet the needs that we have as a people. And so APDEP was established again in 2007 with certain kind of mission to be able to not only win those skills, but to be able to build concrete development programs that give us the ability to deal with some of the immediate questions that we're confronted with as African people, to help to address and improve the material conditions of our people, but as a part, again, of a long-term strategy to deal with the core contradiction that creates the poverty, that creates the fact that African people don't have clean water, that we don't have access to decent sanitation, that we die every year in the millions from treatable diseases and preventable diseases. So APDEP began to initiate a process where we could really win African people, first of all, to the understanding that the skills that we have, they don't belong to us as individuals. That the only way that, at least in this period, that that African people have had access to the colonial education system and have been able to attain certain kind of specialized skills is because of the struggle of masses of African people, masses of African workers who made that possible, who, not unlike the Africans who are in the streets now, rebelling against this, the murder of African people that happens on a daily basis, that, not unlike this period, there's a period where African people, were struggling to ensure that we had access, essentially for African people to be able to, move towards self-determination. And in that process, opened up the space for Africans to have access to certain skills and that have allowed us now to have African doctors and nurses and engineers and others. And we recognize that we have a responsibility now, because that struggle wasn't made for individuals. That struggle was made for our collective. And we have a responsibility to bring those skills to the African liberation struggle. So AFDEP has been involved in some really incredible programs. And some of those, most of those, many of those have been in Sierra Leone, West Africa, where we initiated our initial programs in 2008. AFDEP has organized community health workers trainings, where we've trained hundreds of African people on the prevention and identification and treatment of waterborne diseases, where we've worked to train Africans, everyday people, on the prevention and identification of Ebola virus disease, where we've built rainwater harvesting systems, to address the issue of lack of clean water that our people have in many parts of the continent, where we've built nursery schools, where we built vocational schools, where we built infant and maternal health centers, where we've helped to deliver more than 3,000 babies without death of mother or child. And these programs are programs that were, developed with the skills that we have as African people, pooling the resources that we have to be able to fund and to make these programs a reality. AFDEP has built tremendous programs also in the United States, where we built community farms, community gardens, youth and adult educational programs, and programs that address the healthcare issues that we are faced with as African people, including chronic diseases like diabetes and hypertension and other kind of colonial health conditions that impact African people. And in this most recent period, AFDEP was called on by our party to lead our COVID-19 People's War Commission, with the responsibility of establishing a strategy to be able to win African nurses and doctors, into AFDEP's Project Black Ankh, which was initially established in 2014 as AFDEP's response to the Ebola virus epidemic that hit West Africa, and where we determined that it was necessary for African people to have our own emergency response and preparedness organization. That we knew that it wasn't enough for African people to sit back and hope and expect that the thousands of NGOs and charities that operate, saying that they're operating in the name of supporting African people and helping us to deal with the contradictions that we're confronted with, that we knew that there was not something that we could rely on to solve the needs of our people, but that we had the ability and we had the responsibility to establish a capacity to respond to natural disasters and imperialist imposed pandemics and all kind of other contradictions that impact African people. And so we initiated Project Black Ankh as the Africans' response, the African nation's response to the Red Cross, an organization that again was initiated in response to the Ebola virus epidemic, and that has been really reignited in this period of COVID-19, where we have mobilized our medical volunteers, from around the African world to be able to develop protocols, that the African nation can follow to ensure that we're, minimizing our risk of catching COVID-19. That's created flyers and brochures and all kinds of materials that our organizers throughout the Uhuru movement have been taken by the thousands, throughout this country and throughout Africa, and has mobilized, our medical forces to initiate a telehealth program where Africans from around the world can access medical advice related to COVID-19, so that we can make sure that this colonial virus, doesn't have the ability to continue to devastate, African people in the United States and around the world. And so AFDEP has been really, really busy and really important, I think, strategy of the African People's Socialist Party. And it really gives African people an opportunity to be a part of a process that can deal with the root cause, because what we're up against is a political contradiction that's been imposed on African people that's created all the things that we hate to see, but that charity can never solve. Nothing but African self-determination, nothing but the African Revolution can ultimately, solve all of the horrible material conditions that have been imposed on African people. So I want to just say, before closing out, that we want you to join AFDEP, that there's a place for you in the All African People's Development and Empowerment Project, and that we really want to encourage you to go to developmentforafrica.org and go to our membership tab. And on our membership tab, you can see our principles of unity. And I think it's important for us to say that our principles of unity make it clear that we recognize that everywhere we are as African people, we're one people, that the resources of Africa are the birthright of African people everywhere. That's what this struggle is about, that African people need self-determination. We don't need charity. We have the responsibility to use the skills that we have towards the liberation and unification of Africa and African people, and that the skills that we have don't belong to us as individual African people, but they belong to, have to be used for the benefit of the masses of African people everywhere. And we've got something I want to invite you to. We've got a telethon that we're organizing today. We initiated our own economic institution that supports the programs of AFDEP. Back in 2016, it's called Zenzele Consignment. We're African clothing consignment store and a hub, a political, social, and economic hub for the African community. And we're having a great online telethon today. It's going to start at 2 p.m. You can Central Time, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in the U.S. You can check us out live on our Facebook page, which is Zenzele Consignment on Facebook. And really want to encourage you, there you'll see a lot more about the history of AFDEP, history of our economic institution. And I think it would be a great opportunity for all of us to see this great strategy that the African People's Socialist Party has initiated. So again, I want to appreciate the opportunity to participate in this study and say Uhuru.
Uhuru. Oh, all right, we can hear from by Uhuru.
Uhuru. Can I be heard?
There's an echo somewhere.
Yeah, we hear you, but there's a serious echo someplace.
Okay, so I think that I'm gonna have to go off Zoom on the phone that you can't hear, and you will be able to hear my voice. So I'm gonna exit off Zoom.
It sounds fine now.
Okay, Uhuru, comrades. There's some difficulties, but we still here, and that's the importance of organization, because we can solve the problem. And I just really want to salute Director Akile and her leadership. And I just really want to appreciate the overview by Chairman Omali Yeshitela, our leaders. It's a serious echo on my end. So if I could just, I might have to exit off Zoom.
Well, we can hear you all right here. The echo is not here now. So.
Okay, so I'm going to ignore the echo. Okay, so yeah, I just really want to appreciate that overview that really sums up the terrain and what's happening with African people right now, and just why the mass movements were built. And just really salute and appreciate this body and this African People's Socialist Party, because African people had to have its own party, as Chairman said. And so my name is Kalun Bayi, and I'm the international president of the International People Democratic Uhuru Movement. And right now I am located here in St. Louis, Missouri. And, as Chairman said, that PDOM was built in 1991. And, it was built, of a response of the series of attacks that happened to African people in the struggle for liberations in the 60s. And a mass movement had to have its way to bring African people back into political life. And the International People Democratic Uhuru Movement is an international organization. So I am based in St. Louis, but we are an international organization. So wherever African people are, we are, and we want to be, and we are on the ground struggling to help African people to understand that we one people, one Africa, one nation. And we cannot have a revolution just in Ferguson or in St. Petersburg, Florida, or wherever we find ourselves. So we have to unite our struggle. And so that's why the international part is so critical, because, you know, we call ourselves these funny titles and names, and then we get, you know, something about, oh, I'm from St. Louis, you know, or I'm from St. Pete. But we are African people, and these borders are fake, and we have to unite our struggle. So the international, we are an international organization. And the people is the African working class. The International People's Democratic Uhuru movement understand that the African working class got to lead the struggle, that the African working class has to have its own party. It has to have its own mass organization. We have to be in the room. The petty bourgeoisie have always took the struggle of symptoms that happen to colonize people all over the world and use it to chase emblems. But we understand that all these things that happen into our community and the experience that we experience, no matter where we are, is because we are colonized people. And so the people is the African working class that have to lead the struggle of liberation under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party, a revolutionary organization where we get our culture, our direction, and how we move in our campaigns. You know, and the democratic, it's our democratic right to fight, to say the police cannot come into our community and kill our babies and kill us and kill our husbands and kill our wives. It is our right to fight and say that we should have in our community everything that we want in our community that is owned and produced by us. It is our democratic right to fight to make sure that we ensure the education system is educating our kids the way that we feel. This is our democratic right. And the Democratic Party won't do it, the Republican Party won't do it, and the Democratic Socialist Party ain't gonna do it. But the African People's Socialist Party built EPDM to make sure that we can fight for a real, true democratic demand, and that we won't be bamboozled by any bootlicker or anyone else that comes into our community and say that they're fighting for the democratic rights. We won't be bamboozled because we have a theory that informs our worldview and who our leaders should be. So the democratic word is very strategic, why it's placed in the name of the international people, democratic. And, you know, the Uhuru means freedom. Uhuru means that colonized people have to be engaged with the ideas and be engaged with the ideas that we are not free and be obsessed with who have power over our life, that it is our time, it is our duty to fight for Uhuru power. And that means that we can't share this power and share mistakes. You can't share power with somebody. You either want the power or you don't. And so we are fighting for power, not for people to like us, not for just a key system, but we want complete power over our lives, over our community. And the Uhuru movement has the African People's Socialist Party, the party, a revolutionary party, a Vanguard party that is bent on no matter what happens, no matter who's killed, no matter what contradictions that we experience as colonized people, but we have to continue to move towards liberation. And that's critical. Everybody can't do that. But the party has willingly volunteered people such as myself, and it could be you too, that have said that no matter what happens in my life of symptoms of being a colonized person, I am going to stand the test of time and never give up to make this revolution. And so Uhuru is critical. And the movement, a movement is more than just protest. And as Sherman said, protest is good. Resistance is good. We have to resist. We have to have resistance. But the resistance has to be attached to a revolutionary way forward. We have to have, a to what end. And in this movement, we say that. That's critical. Every action every campaign, such as African Shores Genocide, the reparations certificates, building APIDM offices wherever we are, which are mandates that APIDM is taking on right now. But all these are not just campaigns. These are revolutionary demands to win the masses to be able to understand, imagine, and see a future for the first time in their life, to bring them back into political life where they have been shoved out of, to help them to be able to see, hear, and feel and know what Black power is and what it is not. Because right now in Minnesota and everywhere we see these resistance rallies are happening, you better believe, like Chairman said, that they don't dump money in here to confuse the people, to even sometimes sound like us. But what you will be able to know, if it smells like a duck, look like a duck, is a duck. So even if the duck tries to take on a different identity, what is the demand? What demands is coming out of here? What are the demands? Liberation, freedom, complete, power over our life. We saying that we want Black community control of the police. We want to have the power over our own community, over our own life. You know what I'm saying? That we have to be able to feed, clothe, and house ourselves. I just really appreciate everything that was said before me by President Aisha and President Comrade Yeshitela. Made a very, very important point that we don't need any more EBT lines. We have to be brought into an organization that's going to help us to hold our heads up, stick our chest out, and take power that have been snatched from us. And it's our birthright. It is our duty to make sure that our children have a future for themselves. So if PDOM is having our convention, this convention is going to be so critical in this period to make sure that we build in hubs, that we are, going into these rooms, entering into local elections, raising up the demands of Black power, to give people the opportunity to be able to hear and see and stand up for the people and not, do the little stuff that we see these politicians do and kiss it and tap dancing and things like that. PDOM has to raise the demand of this is genocide. Reparations is due, but we have to demand it. If PDOM is saying, sign this petition, we are going to fight in the behalf of the African working class to take these resources for the African nation and disperse it how we see fit. And so I just really appreciate the opportunity to talk about the mass movement, and I consider it a complete honor to be part of the Central Committee of the African People's Socialist Party. This is the party of the African working class. You just seen that this is the party that understands that African women must lead, gotta lead, will lead in the organization. This party has answered fundamental questions that have been laid out, and now we have pictures of, you can see that this is not just a report, but this is an actually living document. That it's history, a blueprint of what we are using to do, to be able to study and see how far we have came and where we are going. Uhuru. Thank you.
Uhuru, President Colombai, thank you for that presentation. And now I'd like to bring up Comrade Chairwoman Penny Hess of the African People's Solidarity Committee. Uhuru, Chairwoman Penny.
Uhuru, thank you, Director Akile. And I want to salute Chairman Omali Yeshitela for the incredible leadership. And Chairman Omali Yeshitela is our leadership in the African People's Solidarity Committee, just for the brilliance and tirelessness over the last 50 years of leading the struggle for the revolution and liberation of Africa and African people everywhere. We salute Deputy Chair Onizine Yeshitela, under whose leadership we are accountable around the question and the reality of bringing in reparations to the African Revolution, to Director Akile Anai of the Agitprop Department, Dr. Aisha Fields, ANWO President Yeshitela Orunmila, President Kalambayi Andanet for all of these brilliant presentations and leadership at the National Central Committee of the party and the entire African People's Socialist Party. And we salute this incredible period that the party has played a leading role in ushering in this period of mass African resistance, fierce resistance of the African masses and the working class. And that the African People's Solidarity Committee was founded in 1976. And it is part of what the chairman was laying out earlier in the overview, that the party has solved the problems of the revolution in the face of the counterinsurgency, the US government's war against the African revolution of the 1960s, and solved the problems, figured out how it will win, and the party is winning this time around. And we will see, and we're in the process right now of witnessing the liberation of Africa, the unification of all African people, the return of the stolen resources everywhere. And the question of white people strategically placing us under the leadership of the Party of the African Working Class to be Black power in white face in the heart of the white colonizer population, extending the African Revolution into white society and winning reparations to African people. It has been a powerful and brilliant strategy of the African Revolution, and it has been incredibly successful and is unfolding now more and more, even as we speak. And as we know that the party, the African People's Socialist Party, created the African People's Solidarity Committee as part of its strategy for winning as much as it could, and to deal with this question of what about the white people, based on its understanding of parasitic capitalism, that capitalism was born by Europe's assault on Africa, the kidnapping of African human beings, turning them into commodities that were the first commodities for capitalism, and the colonization, the genocide of the indigenous people, and the colonial domination of the majority of the population of the earth for the benefit of the entire white population that sits on the pedestal of the oppression of African people and the colonial domination of the people on the planet Earth. The recognition that we are the colonizers, that this is settler colonialism inside the US, and that we are winning white people to solidarity with an anti-colonial struggle, not racism, something that the African People's Solidarity Committee has been mandated by the understandings of the party for the last 44 years to put out to white people. And the situation in the world today, this incredible period of resistance, is enabling white people to begin to, in a much larger and broader way, begin to hear this question and to understand it. And it is really, really powerful. White people can hear this now. And our work right now is to stamp out forever, wipe it off the vocabulary of white people, the question of racism, because it is nothing but pure opportunism to maintain white power and maintain the colonial domination of African people. So we understand that the anti-colonial struggle demands that white people be organized as an anti-imperialist stand under the leadership of the Party of the African Working Class. It's not something to sit in a cafe and talk about. This is a mandate, a clear responsibility to recognize that we owe reparations to African people based on a revolutionary demand that all the resources of Africa and African people are stolen. They're in our hands, and they must be returned into the hands of the African working class, organized under its party, not as charity, but as the true redistribution of the stolen wealth into the hands of the true working class of the world. So the African People's Solidarity Committee, and we want to call on all white people who are watching right now to join the African People's Solidarity Committee, you can go to apscuhuru.org. I know that some white people are going to the African People's Socialist Party's site, and the party is sending us those, and we appreciate that you want to take this stand, but you can go to the African People's Solidarity Committee at apscuhuru.org. We are implementing and working on our regional strategy as mandated by the Congresses and the political reports in recent years by the chairman of the African People's Socialist Party. We are building the infrastructure of our office of the APSC chair. We are carrying out and implementing a plan for political education directed towards white people, even as we call on very seriously for all white people to come to the chairman's study, every Sunday morning. But we also are creating an opportunity for white people to be able to discuss the questions and go deep into the questions such as the African nation, the understanding of African internationalism, the question of the counterinsurgency, and all of these issues as white people, to have the ability to discuss that and come to the conclusions of our responsibility as reparations to African people as a stand of genuine solidarity. We are also, we'll be holding the African People's Solidarity Day in October as a special event to build the African People's Solidarity Committee. Our mass front, the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, has had just a wave of new members, of people unsolicited going to the Uhuru Solidarity Movement.org, becoming members as a way of expressing their solidarity with the African People's Socialist Party, the struggle for political power in the hands of the African working class, and the Black Power blueprint in this period in a really powerful way. There are many others who have signed up, new people who have signed up. We have a meeting on Monday night that has already 145 people signed up for that we're going to be laying out, and Director Akile is going to be speaking at that, and you can find out more about that at uhurusolidarity.org. We have members of USM in at least 130 cities and probably more now. We have North Americans coming to the party's website of Black Power Blueprint in the past few days, raising almost $1,000 there. And, you know, just in response to the police murder of George Floyd and the incredible resistance and the political leadership of the party. So we are fighting the moneyed sector and saying that they have blood on their hands, and calling on white people, even as we call on white people to pay reparations to African people. We also have a front, the Office of Reparations and Economic Development, led by Comrade Kitty Riley, working directly under the Office of Deputy Chair, where we are part of working on the Africans 1 Billion Strong donor campaign, and many other important fronts of the party's economic strategy, where there are more than 50 political/economic institutions, and many of the members of the African People's Solidarity Committee are honored to be able to play a role in that under the leadership of Deputy Chair. So Uhuru, again, I want to call on all white people who want to get involved, who want to take a stand, to get active and not just talk about this, to go further than protest, to be part of the strategy of the African working class for liberation, to go to apscuhuru.org or uhurusolidarity.org. Uhuru, and thank you, Chairman, for allowing us to participate today.
Uhuru, comrade. So we've heard from these incredible leaders of our movement. It's interesting because I didn't notice until just a few minutes ago that all the leaders that we've heard from our mass work are women. And I think that's a profound statement that we make about our party and our understanding of what it takes to change the world. And we're not a party that has ghettoized the issue of women's freedom, women's liberation, where the women are just there to learn how to take care of children and how to teach our children to be, bring the culture to the children and that kind of thing. That women play a fundamental role in making every decision that's made in this party. All around the world, that's the case. And beyond that, we've created a space, a situation where there is a place where we guarantee that the specific issues of women, so it's not just a generalized participation, it's that as well, helping to shape and define everything that we do. There's a specific place on our Central Committee that deals specifically with the question of women, bringing women into political life and helping to make all those struggles that particular and peculiar to women as such. I think that's worth mentioning moving forward. And also that this mass work that we do helps us to understand that this is mass work that involves itself all the time in forms of resistance that has participated in rebellions. We have come under assault in meetings of the International People's Democratic Uhuru movement, where 300 or more policemen attacked our headquarters and resulted in attempts to kill everybody in our leadership, and where the resistance was so fierce that a helicopter was shot down by masses of people in 1996. So we are involved in resistance, mass work on every front. But the thing about that we are helping other people to see, comrades and brothers and sisters, is that resistance and rebellion have to become revolution. See, just because there's a rebellion someplace doesn't mean that it will result in a transfer of power. And that's what it has to be about. When the Vietnamese were involved in struggle, right? They had organization on the ground for years and years and years. And they went through ebbs and flows of resistance and struggle, but the leadership of the party pulled all of it together so that people who were involved in mass work, everybody from monks to just ordinary workers and peasants, but the party assumed leadership and direction of the entire process, so that as the monks and students and intellectuals and peasants, their activities was funneled into a way that resulted in actually the defeat first of the French, and then the defeat of US imperialism and the Vietnamese coming to power over their own country, their own government. And the same thing, the Cubans weren't fighting for just having fighting against this incident and that incident, just as that too often happens. And what the ruling class and opportunists, even in our own midst, even in the African communities, will have us insist that we just fight against this, that something's wrong with you, you're trying to take over everything, et cetera, because you're fighting and go beyond the resistance, go beyond the rebellion, and we want power. We have to have power of our own lives, and the party is the instrument through which we make this happen. And what the party was able to do is that as the Black Revolution of the 1960s around the world, when I say in this instance, I'm talking about the murder of Che Guevara as well as the murder of Patrice Lumumba, that as it was defeated around the world, then the party is the instrument that emerged to provide overall leadership to this struggle, so that the resistance now can contribute to an actual revolution. So we turn rebellion, we turn resistance into revolution. We do as has been done with the Cubans, with the Vietnamese, with the Chinese, with the Algerians, with every place where people had political instruments through which they could assume leadership for the whole struggle of the whole people. Then the consequence was to take power. And what we've just been participating in now, in the 1960s, when the defeat of the revolution happened, one of the things that this party did was to open up a new front of struggle, So they were killing us in Newark, New Jersey. They were killing us in Detroit. They were assassinating our leaders on the ground. We opened up a new front. We opened up a front in the bedrooms of the colonizer. We opened up a front in the communities of the colonizers. We opened up a new front so that we created the African People's Solidarity Committee that has resulted in the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, so that now the imperialists have to fight us on more than one front inside the country. They have to fight us in their own homes, which is what's important. And so we fracture the unity, the reactionary unity of white people, and give white people an opportunity to participate in revolutionary unity with the oppressed to overturn a social system that white women say oppresses them, that white workers say exploit them, that white homosexuals say keeps them locked up in closets and what have you. We now give them the instrument through which they can overturn all of that by uniting with the fundamental question that upholds the entire system of oppression and exploitation. So that's part of what it is that we've been talking about. And so I just wanted to make that statement and turn it back over to this incredible leader of the director of agitation and propaganda, so she can take us further. Uhuru.
Great, Chairman, thank you. And I just really want to salute all of the amazing leaders of the African Socialist Party and the mass organizations, and really appreciate those presentations that were given today. And it is now time to open up with questions from our audience and online viewers. We want to appreciate everyone who's tuning in via Facebook and YouTube, and also appreciate all of your engagement. And we encourage you to continue to invite your friends and family to the study, and put out widely on all of your social media platforms. Let them know what's going down right now, this Omali Taught Me Sunday study. So of course, we like to acknowledge where people are watching from. We have viewing with us today, Germany, St. Petersburg, Florida, St. Louis, Missouri, Oakland, California, Boston, Massachusetts, Congo, Trinidad, Tampa, Florida, Newark, New Jersey, Athens, Ohio, Ashland, Virginia, Minneapolis, Minnesota, San Diego, California, London, Ireland, and Hempstead, New York. So I want to salute and appreciate, everybody who's tuning in right now from all over the world. All of us, no matter where it is that we are a part, can be a part of the worldwide African Revolution. So we did have 2 comments, and one is from Barry Sexton. And he says, "Long live Palestinian and Black resistance. Exactly, comrades. In Ireland, we too experienced colonialism and genocide by British imperialists. Revolution is the solution. I'm a white man. I support Black revolution." And he wants to donate to the African People's Socialist Party. So Uhuru. And Comrade Marissa of African People's Socialist Party, Seattle, says, "This is the only organization that has solved the question, what about white people? White people are getting organized under the party's leadership and raising reparations in the white settler colonies to return back to the African nation." So we're still looking for more questions, but we can open it up for any of the panelists here today who want to speak to any of the presentations that were given by these incredible dynamic leaders of our mass organization. So is there anything that the leaders of our party, want to say? Or
May I just speak first to the comment made by the comrade from Ireland?
Uhuru, yes.
Because I think that's important, because the British held Ireland under colonial domination for recognizably for 800 years. And all the Irish, people like the Kennedys and what have you, had some relationship or some respect to the right for the Irish, for Ireland to be free from British colonialism. And many of them made considerable contributions to that struggle. But at the same time that was happening, inside the United States, there were raging battles that Africans were fighting in various communities around this country, and sometimes Irish were on the side of reaction in those struggles. In 1983, I traveled to Belfast, Ireland, as a part of organizing effort I was doing throughout the world, taking the reparations demand and building the African Socialist International. And I was hosted by the Irish Republican Socialist Party at that time. And it was the first time that I'd ever seen white people. I couldn't have imagined it living under the kinds of conditions that African people were living in the United States. That is real. I mean, some of the infrastructure in Ireland obviously would have been better than what we see in many of the African communities, but the people lived under horrible conditions. I mean, with British, you're talking about military outposts or everywhere. I was in Belfast and Northern Ireland, everywhere. The British troops were there to contain and control the people. I saw people who, the people who picked me up, one had an incredible, horrible limp because they had been shot by British troops. Another had been shot in the throat. I mean, and I saw Irish people who had been brain damaged by being hit by these rubber bullets, that they call them rubber bullets, while they were in cells, prison cells, and the British guards would fire the so-called rubber bullets into the cells and hit people, and they fractured their skull and gave brain damage and what have you, and they still were infirmed by that when I saw that. The Irish Republican Socialist Party held a press conference while I was there. And at the press conference, they put out a statement in solidarity with the struggle of African people in this country. That is to say, this country, the United States. They said that they didn't want any money or any resources from Irish in the United States who were opposed to the liberation of Black people, who could not unite with the demand for reparations by Black people. They publicly, in this press conference, united with our demand for reparations. And it was a really important kind of step and stance. And the party had moved to expand the understanding of the question about oppression and exploitation beyond just the borders here and take it out of the grips of the ruling class. And that's part of the work we've been doing for a number of years, but the Irish did that. And it was interesting because when I left, as I was approaching the immigration station where whatever you call, when I was handing my passport to the immigration officer, she called me by name, said she hoped I enjoyed my stay in Ireland. That's even before she had the passport in her hands. And the next day they burned the office of the Irish Republican Socialist Party to the ground. So I just wanted to make that comment and help to perhaps contextualize even for the person who just made that statement, who may know nothing about our history with the Irish resistance. People should understand that. And Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman, thank you. We did have a question and a comment. We have a question from Tanessa on YouTube. And she asked, how can I do my part in my city of Columbus, Ohio, or start a branch here? And I just wanted to, say to Tanessa that we appreciate that question and encourage you to join the African People's Socialist Party. And you can do that at apspuhuru.org. And, we want you to build that branch in Columbus, Ohio. Uhuru, Tanessa. And we had a comment from Charo of the African Socialist Party Bahamas. Says, Uhuru comrades, one Africa, one nation, and down with imperialism from the Bahamas. Uhuru, comrade Charo. So are there any, the panelists, the leadership of our party want to contribute to this discussion or, ask a question of any of the leaders of our mass organizations?
Uhuru, I just want to really appreciate all of the great speakers and all of the great presentations. I know when I was listening to Dr. Aisha Fields, it made me think of when I first came into the ranks of the Uhuru movement. We had the Bobby Hutton Freedom Clinic. The party had in Oakland, California, the Bobby Hutton African People's Freedom Clinic. And I often think that if ABDEP
when was that, comrade?
Uhuru. Was that, Chairman?
When was that?
That was in 1987. And thank you. I often think about if ABDEP was organizing on the ground the way it is now in 1987, I probably would have joined ABDEP at that time. But the work was on the ground then that Dr. Aisha was talking about, and the clinic we built was going into the impoverished communities in Oakland, California, not only providing the free hypertension screening, not only providing free childcare collectives and the health work we were providing, but it was to win African people into political life, to bring them back into organization, to give them a vehicle to join the African Revolution. And everything that I've heard today from ANWO to NPDOM to ABDEP, even with Penny Hess's brilliant presentation around white people with the African People's Solidarity Committee and with the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, all roads lead to the African Revolution. And I just really just wanted to appreciate that and recognize the significance of the African People's Socialist Party and encourage anyone who's watching this webinar to join the African People's Socialist Party and any North Americans, of course, to join the African People's Solidarity Committee. Uhuru.
Uhuru. Uhuru Comrade Bakri, that's our Western Regional Representative in APSP USA. So Uhuru Comrade Bakri. And we had a question from Comrade Kenya on YouTube, says, Uhuru, I just want to appreciate all the presentations this morning. And can anyone elaborate on what it means to take power and why you can't change the conditions from the inside? And I would pose that to our presenters this morning, if any one of you want to take that question.
Ms. Kalambayi, and that is a great question. I know that I had struggled. Can I be here?
You're heard, but turn the, if you could mute the volume on your computer.
Okay, better now?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Perfect.
What's funny is it's coming through the phone that wasn't working earlier, but this social system was built on the theft of African people. Like the creation of this social system was built on stealing Africans, the rape and genocide that happened. I don't know. And once I understood that, like once that was clear to me of how this social system was built, once I kept hearing Chairman talk about colonialism and how, before it was a dollar bill, it was my, Black body. And, like this is how this social system was built. I don't know how you can reform something to be other than what it was built to do. America is functioning right. It's not broken. It's working exactly how this social system was built to do. It was built to colonize and oppress African and colonized people and to loot the world. You can't reform that. You can't make that be something better. You can't get something else. So that's what I would contribute, is that you can't reform something that is working correctly. You have, if you don't like the way it works, then you have to destroy it and build what you want to see. Uhuru.
Uhuru, this is Yeshitela. Can I add to that? People think that by participating in this voting process, that getting elected officials into office and by having a seat at the imperialist table, that somehow that is capturing power. And I just think that, just to unite with what Kalambayi says, is that this system is in no way, shape, or form meant for African people's production and reproduction of life. It is at our expense. It was founded on that. It's parasitic. It will continue to steal, rob, violate, kill African people, because that is what it was. That's what it was founded to do. So we should not be at all surprised at the levels of violence and the levels of oppression that are felt amongst African people around the world. And this is the very nature of how the system came to be and needed for its survival. The power is looking at that, understanding that, and focusing on overturning that, destroying that, building a new system that is going to produce and reproduce life for African people. And that's a Black power system. That is the African People's Socialist Party, and that is what we all represent. Uhuru.
Uhuru. I think it's also akin to the idea of having a Black warden or an African warden to a prison system. And an African warden, under some unique and extraordinary circumstances, might even improve the conditions and clean up the prison on a regular basis and allow showers every day for more than 10 minutes that you get. But you're still in prison. And so they allow you under pressure, like they will coming out of Minneapolis. If we let them, under pressure, they will allow certain kinds of reforms. If we allow them to legislate and determine what reparations is, you get a new poverty program under the same system. We will not repossess our resources in any meaningful way. It will not give us custody of our lives, our capacity to feed, clothe, and house ourselves, independent of the interference of the colonial state and system that made it necessary for us to demand reparations in the first place. So I just think that it has to be clear. And this is the significance of this party and African internationalism and theory that we must introduce, and that we are introducing into all these mass struggles that we see. We have to be in charge of our own lives, and we have to have the courage to do it. We have to have the courage to even imagine being in power and taking our own freedom. And so I just think that's part of what it is that we're looking at. We see today, we see that people are talking about, we rise up today and we say, look at what this cop did to George Floyd. And we burned down some buildings and things appropriately, perhaps not enough, but it's a good start. And it pushes the state and the government and all the pundits and the media to say, look at how badly Black people are treated by the police. And they'll bring out statistics and say, see how badly Africans are treated by police, and that we have to reform, we have to fix this. They show, like with this colonial virus that's affecting people everywhere, they say. And then they say, but yes, it's affecting everybody, but Africans are affected 250% at a 250% higher rate than white people who live in the same situation. We got to find out what the hell is causing this. And so we got people who look at disease and colonial and viruses and things like that. They say, okay, we got a massive prison population. We must reform the prison system. Look at it. We got more prisons, people in prison than any place on earth. That African people only constituting what they say is 13% of the people in the United States have something like half or more of the people who are locked up in prison. We must investigate and find out what the hell is responsible for that. You say, look at all the bad housing, the poverty, all these things, and all these times say, well, let's look and find out what happens to this. In every instance, some lick-spittle, bootlicking opportunists will come up with a solution that will not challenge the existing social system, can't even identify, and they will keep us looking just at these particular incidents without being able to say that there's something wrong with the whole system and African people's relationship to it. And so that's what the party is necessary. That's what it is that we're taking on. And that's why we say, you can't reform this damn thing. The thing does exactly what it was born to do. And if this cop who they have implicated with his knee on the neck of George Floyd, if he goes to jail or something happens to him by some near miracle, it will be done as a way to salvage the system as opposed to help overturn the relationship that we have to this system. We have to have our own power. We have to have the courage to take that power, notwithstanding how vicious we know the social system has always been when we've moved forward. That's how Malcolm died. That's why Lumumba died. That's why Nkrumah died. That's why every instance they will murder you. That's why they're trying to destroy Venezuela, destroy the Iranian people. Anything that had rise up that challenges the status quo, they would try to kill you. And we know that. And that's what frightens a lot of people. And that's what allows a lot of petty bourgeois forces and opportunists to settle for something short of what it is that our people need to survive. So, you know, I appreciate the question, and let's move forward. Are there any other, I guess, observations that people on the panel would have to any of the questions and issues that's being represented today? Uhuru.
Chairman, we did have another question from from online. It's from Sammy Davis, and I think it'll be really good. What can we do now to help our people in this state of emergency we find ourselves in? Is their question.
That's a great question. And that's the question that every opportunist in the world is answering. What do we do to help the situation now, right now with this state? And the fact is that one of the things that's helping the people right now is the existence of the party. For the first time in history, the African working class has its own revolutionary organization, its own revolutionary party. And the task of this party, among other things, is help the class to understand what its historic mission is, to destroy the system and to build our own power. The working class must become the new ruling class. And so right now, there is no solution other than coming into a revolutionary organization that has the future with us all the time, that we're fighting. Everything that we do right now must contribute to the eradication of the social system. You must join the party and the Uhuru movement. You must join the party of the advanced detachment and the movement that has been created to overturn the whole system. And while, if the house is on fire, occasionally we want to put the fire out, depending on where it is. If it's like 1600, what is it called? What's that avenue where the white people's house is? Pennsylvania Avenue. I mean, we don't need no water. Let the burn. But so sometimes, we might want to do that because our people are maybe in the house and we want to rescue them, but we're working all the time to get our people out the house and construct. That's what we call dual power. We create our own power while in the process of destroying their power. That's what this meeting is about. That's what these working, these mass organizations is about. That's what Black Power Blueprint that you've heard of already in terms of economic development that we do here and around the world is about. We have to make an assault. And this is a long gone, we have initiated what we call People's War. People's War is protracted war that recognizes what its aims are and that mobilizes the entire population to overturn the relationship that we have to a social system. And so it's not something that happens overnight. It's not, and by the way, we're not at an overnight situation right now. We're in hundreds of years, we've been waging this struggle, but the People's War, the masses have to be brought into it. Masses, you saw masses in Minneapolis, and you see masses in Louisville, and you see masses in DC and all these other places, but they're masses without the advantage of revolutionary organization that informs all of their practice, revolutionary theory that informs everything they're doing, and that's what the task that we are confronted with right now. So I hope this comrade joins this process so that if we do deal with some immediate contradiction, which what a lot of the mass organizations, some of the mass organizations we just spoke to deal with the immediate contradictions, but the process of this dealing with the immediate contradictions is a part of the process of bringing them into long-term relationship trajectory to overturn the social system. There may be others who want to comment on that or anything else that we're saying. Uhuru.
Uhuru, yeah, we have a few more minutes, so we want to really encourage the panelists, the presenters today, to weigh in on this discussion.
Uhuru, comrades. Uhuru Akile.
Uhuru, DC.
Uhuru, I just wanted to really appreciate all the panelists who presented today from ANWO, MPDUM, APTEP, and from the Solidarity Movement. And I wanted to ask President Yeshitela, we talk a lot about incarceration of men, a lot. And I know that ANWO is on the forefront of creating a program that speaks to the incarceration of African women because they are that percentage is growing by 828%, for African women to being locked up. Can you talk a little bit about that program that ANWO is leading right now?
Uhuru. Yeah, I just want to clarify that we're talking about the mass incarceration of African women within the United States and how that program is called Face Off, Fighting Against Colonialism, Empowering Families and Felons. And we're not only just talking about African women who are in prison, because that is a fundamental contradiction, but we're looking at the whole entire way that African women are connected to the prison system. So the African women who go visit people who are in prison, the African women who are tied to it in so many different ways. So we're looking at politicizing African women who are in prison. We want to make sure that that they get the Burning Spear newspaper. We want to help them facilitate, join African National Women's Organization, organize in the prisons to get other African women to understand and contextualize why they're in prison, what's happening to them, colonialism, all of that. We want to also organize a response to, by organizing their families who are not in prison, to also be a part of raising the struggle around, raising the struggle and bringing the attention to the reasons why African women are in prison by organizing on the outside as well. The African women who are visiting African people who are in prison are also connected to the system because they are the ones who are supporting financially. They are the ones who are going to visit and also having to undergo a certain level of scrutiny and oppression, also just to go into the prisons, just to go visit, you know, loved ones. And so we're raising up all of these issues, and we are in the beginning stages of it, but we're building solutions to help African women go visit, providing political education, not only to African women who are in prison, but to families and African women who are visiting as well. And we want to organize protests and raise up the issue and continue to build on this, because we recognize that there are movements right now. There are individuals and groups who are doing stuff around women in prison to get them sanitary pads, to do bailouts and all of that stuff. That doesn't address any of it. It doesn't address what we've been talking about here, which is parasitic capitalism. How do we destroy the entire capitalist infrastructure? And how do we destroy the colonial prison system? All of that comes with building African revolution and building African power so that we can have control over our own lives. And so that's what makes this different. You know, we're not just talking about these little specific things that impact African women, but we want to address those, but we also are building out and bringing this whole question of mass incarceration into the African revolution, mass incarceration of African women into the African revolution. Uhuru.
Uhuru. Thank you, President Yeshitela and Deputy Chair Onizine Yeshitela for that question. And we are down to the wire in terms of having to conclude this study, but I wanted to know, Chairman, did you want any last words for this study before we close out and go into our announcements?
Uhuru, I just want to say that it's really good to have this physical, concrete material manifestation of the political report. And we've been going over this political report, and I think it's important. It helps also the people, other than those who are inside our party and our movement, to see what an organization looks like. It's not just some one person show. You see me more often than not because the party elected me as the leadership, and in many instances I'm the public face in general. But there's a machine that's here, and that you can be a part of, others can be a part of creating and developing and functioning in this machine. That the party is the clearest manifestation of also the growing consciousness of the African working class, of its own significance. We see that some trying to make itself realize that the resistance that's happening now, we're in a very short order of time. The masses of people have risen up, have defied the preachers and pacifists and opportunists and neo-colonial forces and white liberals and everything, have disregarded that totally and begun the process of moving forward. Now the party is the concrete manifestation of the leadership, of the advanced detachment, of the organization, providing structure and leadership to this process through which the masses have broken free, are in the process of trying to break free, because we have to give it ideological clarity and organizational structure, tactics and strategy, et cetera, for it to be effective. So I wanted to just express my appreciation for everybody from the Central Committee being here, for Comrade Secretary General Louise, who had to run out and join mobilization against the US Embassy there in London because of what has happened to his people on this side of the Atlantic Ocean. And alert everybody that to come back to our study next Sunday. And also just to say finally that we will be engaging in more and more of these discussions around what's happening in Minneapolis and et cetera. And in a short order, we're in the process of developing, this is the 20th anniversary of what is an historic kind of hip hop album called Let's Get Free by Dead Prez. And we are in the process now of developing what do you call it, a webinar that we'll have these comrades and us to talk about that album in the context of what's happening now, what's happening in Minneapolis and the state, and we are Africans and everything else that's there. So stay tuned. We will be examining day to day what's happening in Minneapolis and other places throughout this country and the world. Uhuru.
Uhuru. Thank you so much, Chairman. Thank you to the leadership of our party and movement, Uhuru. Salute, we are winning. And because of time, we want everyone to know that if your question was not answered, one of our moderators will correspond with you and make sure that the chairman will see your question. This study was brought to you by the Department of Agitation and Propaganda, Winning the War of Ideas. For revolutionary news and analysis, you can visit theburningspear.com, and that's also where you can see updates around the current situation regarding Minneapolis and anything that our party has upcoming regarding the situation. For revolutionary radio, dynamic shows, and music by Africans all around the world, tune into Black Power 96.3 FM, broadcasting out of St. Petersburg, Florida, and accessible via our Black Power 96 app for Apple and Android, or online at blackpower96.org. And if you're united with what you heard today and you want to learn more about how you can get involved with the African People's Socialist Party, visit apspuhuru.org for all information regarding how you can apply. Doesn't matter where you're located. If you're an African, you can apply for the African People's Socialist Party. You can order your copy of Chairman Omali Yeshitela's latest book, Vanguard, The Advanced Detachment of the African Revolution. That was the book that we read from today. And that can be found on burningspearmarketplace.com. That book is the political report to the 7th Congress of the African People's Socialist Party. For today's event, it was mentioned earlier by Director Aisha Fields of the All African People's Development and Empowerment Project. We have Support the People's Store, Zenzele Telethon. Beginning at 2 p.m. Central, you can support this Black Power institution that serves as a primary economic development for the All African People's Development and Empowerment Project, located in Huntsville, Alabama, featuring live sales, live interviews, and donor givebacks. And they're going live from the Zenzele Consignment Facebook page. So make sure you tune in at 2 p.m. Central for that amazing telethon so you can support Zenzele Consignment. The Black is Back Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparations will host its 4th annual electoral campaign school on June 13th and 14th. Registration details for this event right now is located at blackisbackcoalition.org. So go ahead and get registered for that. And the African National Women's Organization is hosting the Black Women's Convention themed Sisters United for the Revolution, taking place July 11th and 12th. Registration details can be found at ANWO, that's ANWO, Uhuru.org. And we are calling on people to follow closely the All African People's Development and Empowerment Project on Facebook, or visit developmentforafrica.org for important information and helpful tips in regards to COVID-19. African people, the whole situation with COVID-19 has not ended, despite what the capitalist ruling class, might be saying or not saying. COVID-19 is still a very serious threat to African people. So continue to look at the All African People's Development and Empowerment Project for that leadership around that question. Thank you all for tuning in. Make sure you like and subscribe to the Burning Spear TV on YouTube to catch every episode of the Omali Taught Me Sunday Study. Uhuru.